I guess this is everybody. Close enough? Okay. So I can slow play it for a little bit until everybody gets in here. Well, I guess first I have to apologize that they couldn't find anybody else to speak, and y'all got stuck with me for the next couple months. So, and then they also gave me free reign. He said, Chip said, I said, what do you want me to speak about? He said, well, I was going to leave it up to you. And so he just left it all up to me to figure out what we were going to speak about and what we're going to learn about. And so my wife, she goes, oh, I don't know they know you very well. It's like they probably want to keep you in a lane because you can teach about a whole lot of stuff and they may not want to know about everything that you know. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to stick with Proverbs then, and that'll keep me in my lane. So what I decided, I wanted to speak on Proverbs. Proverbs is one of those books that I feel like you can read it 1,000 times and still get something new. And in today's world of the chaos, which we've had chaos since the beginning of time, but in today's world, there's always something to keep us away from the Word. There's always something that is troubling. There's always something that is chaotic. There's always something that wants to keep us away from God's Word, right? And keep our minds on something else. And so Proverbs, I think, is a great book to study daily, and also to help keep everything into perspective for us. And anytime we start to get off track, we can read some Proverbs, and then it'll hopefully bring us the wisdom that we need to stay on track. So who in here has favorite verses from Proverbs, the book of Proverbs? Any of y'all have any verses that you've memorized and that are those? It's that verse that you go to every time you have, or that thought that it's not where you need it to be. Does anybody have any verses that in Proverbs that stand out to them more than the others? 3:5 is a good one. Do you have that one memorized? Can you quote it for us, or do we need to? Okay. Doesn't get much better than that, does it? Yeah, we can't lean on our understanding. We have to lean on His understanding, right? Yeah, when I'm reminded of, or it's like when I go through Proverbs, I feel like I connect with Aguiar. I think that's how you say his name. He's there were three authors that we have in Proverbs. So most of it's Solomon, of course, King Solomon, but we also have Aguiar in chapter 30, and then we have, if I'm pronouncing this right, King Lemuel. Is that right? Maybe? So those are the other two authors, but I connect with Aguiar a little better, just especially in chapter 30, verse 2. He says, surely I am more stupid than any man. And I connect with that verse very well. One of the things I've learned about wisdom and learning is that if you think you know everything, you know nothing. It's like when you get to that point to where you feel like you've got it all figured out, God sure comes in and sweeps your feet out from under you, and you realize that, nope, I didn't know anything, but part of wisdom is understanding that you don't know everything. And when you can lean into God's wisdom and what He gives us, it's a lot easier for us to live without fear in this world, because if we fear the Lord, what other fears can really do anything to us? If we put all of our fear in the Lord, then the worldly fears they really can't do much to us, because we know how powerful the Lord is. And Solomon Solomon gave us this book. I guess God gave us this book through Solomon, and I say I guess, I know. And in Proverbs, we're given, it's a story basically of a father to his son. The first 10 chapters are King Solomon sharing his wisdom to his son, and then we have in chapters, I guess 10 through 29, it's the wisdom of the years. Throughout all the years, it's summarized stories These proverbs are stories, right? So they're summarized stories of basically all the wisdom throughout the years. And so whenever you get into chapters 10 through 29, it's just sayings, and then these memorable sayings that if we can adapt those into our lives will be much, much better. And it'll be easier to navigate, in my opinion, if we can, accept those. And then again, at the end of the book, we have Aguiar, who does his, it's chapter 30, and then the non-Israelite king, Lemuel, he ends it in 31. Well, today we're going to start in chapter 1, but I do want some feedback from you guys. We're going to be here for 2 months, or you're going to be stuck with me for 2 months. I will be in Miami or Florida towards the end of the month. I've got another art fair, another art show, so I'll be traveling, but you'll get me 7 out of 8 weeks. And I'm hoping to get some feedback, and if there's any chapters or anything that y'all's favorites that y'all would like for me to cover, I'm open to it, and please throw it out there, because for me, I think 8 weeks is not enough to go through Proverbs properly. We can definitely hit on the high points, but for it to really to deep dive in it, I feel like this is 6 months, we might need to really get into it. But today we're going to start off with a prayer, and then we'll get into it. If y'all don't mind, bow your heads and pray with me. I'm going to need a little help on this one from God, so I'm going to ask for his guidance and wisdom through this. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this beautiful day that we have to come together as a church and worship you and study your word. Be with me now as I teach this class. Help me lean on your understanding through your words, and help us grow together as a church family. Show us the ways that we need to act and live a life according to your word, and help us gain as much as we can through this passage, and help us use this knowledge to help us lead our life in the right way moving forward through every step that we take. And it's in your son's name that we pray. Amen. Kind of a heavy breather, so I don't know if I should pull this mic down here or how does that work. So I'll do my best to keep my breath in check. I'm going to put my glasses on here. Well, we're going to start off. I'm going to start with verses 1 through 7. We'll start with it, and then we'll talk about it for a little bit. Hopefully I get some feedback from you guys. I assume everybody can hear me well. Good enough. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. To understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. I guess I'm done here. We'll stop after that. But it is the beginning of wisdom, right? So, and here in verse 7, he said, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. What do y'all think that means? Why is that the beginning of knowledge?
Well, to learn something, you have to respect. To learn something from respect. And the word fear here to me is more of a son, father. Son respects his father, he fears his father. And so I would want to learn from him because I respect what he says and his understanding of authority figure.
An authority figure? Kind of got to know your place, right? Reverent obedience, right? I definitely agree with that. what, when I think of fear kind of comes in two different forms. One, there's a fear of, like when I was a kid, still feel like a kid at times. If you ask my wife, she says I'm a 12-year-old wrapped in a 46-year-old's body. So I think that's probably good in some ways and bad in others. But when I think of fear, when I was a kid, I was scared. I was fearful of my father's hand. So when I got in trouble, I got in trouble. I remember times where I had to pick out the switch. I had to pick which belt I wanted. That's a very powerful fear that you have of your father. But there's also a fear that you can have that is not so, I don't want to say abusive, but it's a fear of getting in trouble. It's a fear of reverence, like you said. It's a fear of the all-powerful. So when you have that, I think there's a healthy fear, and then there is a unhealthy fear. To me, I try not to live in fear. One of my main goals in life is to live out of faith and not fear. I feel like if you live out of fear, you're always worried. You're always, your body is not uplifted. It is brought down and weighted. So if you have a daily fear of things, you really can't have abundance in God's world. If you're constantly fearful about what could happen or what might happen, I don't see how you can be faithful. Faithful is believing that things that haven't happened yet are going to turn out in a positive way, right? And fear is things that haven't happened yet are going to turn out in a negative way. And they're both the same type of energy. They're just polar opposites. And so, I used to be fearful of everything. I was fearful. One of my biggest fears is speaking in front of a crowd. Still to this day is. But one of the things I've learned through my 46 years of life is that I take fear head on now because I feel like I can't have faith until I break through those fears. And so for me, that fear of speaking in front of a crowd, it was so bad in college that I would get so nervous and shaken, and I actually dislocated my shoulder one time at speech communication my freshman year. I had to have an intro, but in the speech you had to have an attention-getting intro, is what they said. Well, I was telling a story about this bodyguard that I knew in Dallas who was 7'6". His name was Calvin Lane, and about 400 pounds. And this guy was chiseled, six-pack ab, the biggest man I've ever witnessed or met in my life. And if some of y'all may remember, back in the 90s, there was a commercial, Muggsy Bogues. He was a basketball player, 5'3" Muggsy Bogues for the Charlotte Hornets. Well, he went up against Goliath, and Goliath was Calvin Lane. And so that was who Goliath was in that commercial. And he'd be like, oh, ha, 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 and Bugsy was, dribbling through his legs and all this kind of stuff. But he was Goliath versus Muggsy Bogues, which was 5'3". So if you can imagine 5'3" and 7'6". Well, in my speech, I had to come up with some kind of attention-getting intro. Well, I threw myself into the room, act like I was getting thrown out of a nightclub. Well, when I and this is at Freed-Hardeman University, let me remind you. So Freed-Hardeman University, I was studying to be a preacher, but I was a little too much of a hellion, I think, at that time to go into that ministry. And I never had the confidence for it. But as I threw myself into the room, like I was getting thrown out of a club, I dislocated my shoulder. And this is all on camera. They filmed it so we could rewatch it. And as I'm getting up there talking, I was like, did y'all see how big he was? I was like, trying to lift my left hand, and it was like, went up to here. I was like, man, he had to have been 7'6", and all of a sudden my face goes white, my shoulder droops down, and I'm just like, oh, I'm sick. I said, I think I hurt myself. And everybody started laughing, funny. They thought I was joking, and I was like, no, I'm really sick. So I went out in the hallway, threw up. They take me to the hospital because my shoulder's dislocated, and then 3 days later, when I got back, I got to finish my speech. Well, I didn't feel like I needed to have an introductory attention getter now that I'm in a sleeve and all that kind of stuff, So I got a C on that speech because I didn't do an intro from my teacher. And of course, being so fearful, getting in front of people, I think that a lot of that came out of that because I was so worried about what could happen. Well, the absolute worst thing happened. And needless to say that when I went to go check out the video to watch it, I never could get it because it was always checked out from everybody else in school. And, so back I think this was a little before America's Funniest Home Videos. I think I probably would have won 10 million or something on that one, but I didn't get any praise from that one. I got a lot of flack from people, but as you're a freshman year, going into a new college out of state, and having that follow me around, that was a fun year, let's just put it that way, But I do know that when I lived out of fear that year, I was sick all the time, I had to take my exams by myself my second semester outside of the class because I was so sick. I had some trench mouth or something. Like I got sick somehow to where I was 105, 106 temperature for 2 weeks, couldn't hold any fluids down. I had one of our preaching students from Sigaville, Johnny Estep, who y'all probably know Johnny. He actually was at Friedharden at the time. We took Greek together, and he had to come, he was the only one I could see that would come bring me food and things like that and check on me during that time. But I was so sick, and I believe that a lot of that came from my fear, the fears that I had. My body, because I had so much fear in my life, my body couldn't heal properly. It couldn't do those things. So I'm very careful about what I think, how I think, and I want to always have faithful thoughts looking forward and not fearful thoughts. Now, I fear God through that reverence, and knowing that He is the supreme being and the creator of all creation, and I do believe that when we create in our daily life, when we create things, we are most like God. When we are creating with our own hands, and, Proverbs is a book about wisdom, right? But this wisdom, it came from the Hebrew word. Now, I'm probably going to butcher this. I took Greek, not Hebrew, and I wish I would have took Hebrew. Now, the older I've gotten, I've studied it more, and I like it more, than the Greek. There's just something about it that it kind of speaks to me. But it was Hokmah, I think is the Hebrew word, Hokmah, which is wisdom, but it was wisdom from a skill or applied knowledge. So the people that he were talking about were the artists, the craftsmen. These were the people that worked and created. But that's where they got their wisdom, was through work. So a lot of times we want things to happen right now, and we want to get the prize without doing the work. That's definitely the way of the 2024. That's how the world is pretty much. They're like, hey, I want the prize now, and I don't have to work for it, and you owe it to me. Well, you can't get wisdom that way. It doesn't come that way. It's like the fruits of the Spirit. We can't get fruits of the Spirit without work, without cultivating the soil. It takes a process. So it's a process of living, but it's a process of learning and constantly pruning and, making our roots stronger, making our soil better. So, in order for us to get fruits of the Spirit, we can't get it overnight. It's not like a gift that you receive. It's something you have to work for. And wisdom is the same thing. And I believe that the only way we can get wisdom is through experience and failure. I know that when I look at my life, and I've failed with the best of them. I mean, you're talking to somebody if I shared the stories, y'all would probably kick me out of here and be like, whoa, Saul, I don't think we need you in our congregation today, but I had to learn those lessons and go through all those hard times. And there was a period of about 3 or 4 years that I was as far away from God as you could get. I didn't want to have anything to do with it or Him because I was so, I think, growing up in the church, and it was, I don't want to say beat over my head, but it was you had to do it no matter what, 4 times, Mondays, we did it all. And so as a kid, getting away from my parents' wisdom that they were teaching me, now I realize how smart they were. Back then I thought I knew everything. And the good thing is Solomon covers that exact same thing coming up here in the next few verses. But in the first 7 verses, we have this introduction to wisdom. And yes, sir, Kim.
So when you talk about
before me.
So for me, that's where the beginning is. That's the foundation. And you know, if fear is not important to him, he doesn't tell you that he's a jealous God. Right? He's saying, I want your entire attention. And for somebody that is in that relationship with God, that's first and foremost. Right?
Agreed.
I don't think that and remember his relationship, you know, Hosea especially, it's a marriage relationship, right? I don't fear my wife.
But you fear that wrath, though, don't you?
But I don't go out of my way to provoke her most times. So,
They say don't poke the bear, right? Not calling you a bear, of course, you know. So.
thanks, man.
Yeah, deal with that later after lunch. So no, you're welcome. No, but no, it's a very good point. And one of the great things that we know now with the New Testament is that what sums up all the commandments before? Love, right? Love your neighbor. You know, that is, he says, all the commandments before are summed up in this one thing. If we can get the love thing down, guess what? It covers all the sins. You know, if we can learn to say, I love you just the way you are, I love you just the way you are, I love you just the way you are, you. Everybody that we see, if we can teach ourselves to think that way, I think that we have no time for sin or thinking about sin because we're thinking about love all day. And if we're thinking about love all day, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about God and his ways, right? So God is perfect through love, but God is love. And love covers what? A multitude of sins. So, you know, as an artist, I'm a painter, you know, in case y'all didn't know. So I never went to art school. I never took any art. I took one art class after I graduated from Freed-Hardeman with a business degree, and I dropped the class after about 7 weeks. The teacher had never sold a painting in her life, and she told me I need to spend more time on my paintings. Well, I was like, well, I want to learn how to paint fast and, you know, in the moment, and I want to learn how to sell my paintings. So I felt like I could not learn anything from her. And so I dropped the class, you know. And I will say that there was a great moment about 9-10 years after that where she came into my art gallery in Dallas. I had an art gallery in the Design District on Dragon Street. Where she came in my art gallery with her students. She didn't recognize me. I didn't recognize her at first, but I was talking to the students and I said, you know, I did take an art class one time, but I dropped it. And I told them where it was at. You know, it was at Quad C, up North Plano, blah, blah, blah. And then the kids were like hitting each other like, that's our teacher. That's our teacher. And I was like, oh, please, thank you, God. You know, so she came back in and I was like, you may not remember me, but I took your class. And she goes, oh, no, I remember you. I remember everybody that finished my class. I said, well, I didn't finish your class. I dropped it, you know. And I said, what do you think of my gallery? You know, but it was, and that was that ego side of me that kind of came in, but it was one of the things that's fueled myself my whole life, for all the people that told me I couldn't do something. You know, when they said that, oh, you can't, you know, like I started painting in 2006, you know, with oil and stuff. I was working for a mentor at the time. I was his handyman in his gallery, and when I did my first painting, I showed it to him. I was like, hey, JD, what do you think? And he said, oh, Tanner. He's like, man, you know, you're really talented in a lot of things. You're a great salesman. He started giving me all these things that I was good at. But then he said, you know, Tanner, art isn't one of them. You know, this is not something you'll ever be able to do. You can't learn color. I am a master at color. I was born this way. These are my God-given gifts, but these are not your God-given gifts. And in that moment, I told him, I know you think you know, but you don't know how big my God is. You know, but at that time, I had been told so many times in my life that I could not do it, that I was fed up with it, and I said, I'm going to show him. Well, I've sold millions of dollars worth of artwork since then, you know, thousands of paintings, and I built my career on symbols of love. So I paint symbols of love for a living. If it draws the emotion of love out of you, that's what I want to paint. And so I paint hearts. I've painted thousands and thousands of hearts. My last show in Miami, I sold 15 hearts to different collectors. You know, so I did that because at the time, you know, I needed to work on loving others more, because I had all kinds of bad influences in my life where I had negative thoughts towards people, races, cultures. I didn't have enough love in my life. Well, when I shifted to start creating out of love on a daily basis, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to create out of love on a daily basis. And I had this little kind of mantra that I would say, paint out of love and abundance until I die. And so that was how I could simplify my life, but how I started focusing on loving others. Well, in that focus on love, it changed my life like in more ways than you could ever understand. Because the amount of people that come to me on a daily basis, they all love love. And so what better people could you work with than people that love love and know how important that is? But that's how I get into people's homes. That's also how I open the door about my faith. Because everybody that sees my work, they say, why the hearts? Why do you paint hearts so much? And I said, well, I believe God is love, and love covers a multitude of sins. And for being a sinner of sinners, like Saul was, I never murdered anybody, so I didn't check that off the list, but I checked off plenty of other things that were in the book and said, don't do this, don't do this. And, well, I did them. I checked them out, and I realized, shouldn't have done that, but I had to learn my lesson and gain my wisdom. Now I have knowledge of those things. Now I have understanding of those things, but I believe that has made me wise, more wise than some, through those experiences, through those trials and tribulations. So for me, I used to be scared of failure. Now I'm not scared of failure. I welcome failure. Bring it, because I know that it's going to be that living water that flows over this rough stone that smooths out my edges, like we saw in David when he was picking his rocks, his stones to go throw against Goliath. We saw that, that example of how the word works. Well, once we realize that our bodies are the temple, right, for His Holy Spirit is in us daily. Now, if we're not acting out of spiritual things, guess what? We're not getting spiritual things. If we're not thinking on spiritual things, we're not getting spiritual things. If we're thinking about fear, guess what we're going to get? We're going to get fear all day long. And we all saw through COVID, when that happened and came on the world a few years ago, the fear propaganda machine was pushed on us and forced on us at a level I've never seen. Some of the people that have lived a few more years, I know you got about 5 or 6 years on me here, but you've probably seen more than I have, right? But that level of fear that we saw I've never seen anything like it, and I was wise enough at the time, and I don't think it was my doing, it was God's doing, to turn off the news, to get rid of all my social media. Like, I deleted every social media account I had, 20,000+ followers from my art career and all that. Like, I gave it all up because I realized that in that moment, I could not keep my mind focused. Everywhere I looked, it was negative, fearful, and it was weighing me down, and it was making me not happy, so I had to get away from it. Now, that being said, I feel like now I should have maybe said more during that time. I should have spoken up and been a man of God, and then, shared that message during that time, because I think it was needed more than ever, but also realized that my words weren't right at the time. I needed to be quiet and listen and learn, because I felt like things that I would have said during that time would have offended somebody that I loved or loved me. And so I had to go silent to learn and listen. But I think in silence you can get rich if you listen, and there's something we can learn from silence. And so for me, that's where I had to go during that time. But now I feel like my voice is better. I am more focused. I know what my values are. Like, I gave up all the business and the successful career to go be a better father and be a better husband. Those were my goals during that time going into COVID. So I retired, my first retirement. Now I'm back, but my first retirement, like Tom Brady, I guess, you get a few retirements throughout your career. But I had retired and went away from it. But again, I needed to shift my values, because for the longest I had put being a businessman and an artist above all else. Even though I was still painting love for God, it wasn't 100%. You know, it was for money, for business, for that kind of stuff. You know, there was that side of it. So I had to shift my values. And in that, it was like I would much rather be a better father to my kids. Like I was giving myself, like I had to grade myself from 1 to 10. You know, how do I, as a Christian, what did I grade myself? Well, I gave myself a 5. Well, we know what a lukewarm Christian gets in God's eyes. And so I was like, well, I got to do better at this or I'm not going to be there. So in that time, I had to make some changes in the way that I thought. Used to, I was scared to get up and speak to people. Now, I still have a little fear, but it's a healthy fear, and I'm thankful for it because now it doesn't control me anymore. I'm not scared to talk to anybody anymore. But I had to go through those times to get there, right? So that wisdom and understanding, and now I feel like I'm ready, bring it. You know, if I need to speak in front of 10,000 or something like that, bring it. I'm not scared at all. But there was a time where I was, and it was because I let that fear control my life and control my future. And, you know, we've always heard fear God and keep his commandments. I mean, that's one of the good ones, right? That's one of the ones that we first know and submit to memory. And which is very, very true. You know, like my only fear is in God and what he can do, you know, but also have so much faith in his abundance that my faith for his abundance is way more than my fear for his torture, you know, because I know he is an abundant God. And it's just like in the Garden of Eden. He said, you can eat of every tree, but this one. And what did the humans do? What do we do? Oh, I want this one. It's like when my mom said, don't touch that, it's hot. What? It's hot. Why didn't you tell me? Well, I told you, you didn't listen, you know? So I think it's the exact same way. So back to Proverbs, I wanted to give you all a little bit of a kind of where I come from, who I am, you know, what brought me here today. And let's get back into Proverbs on these first 7 verses. In this beginning, we see that fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Why do y'all think that is? Is it because they can't see it? Or is it because they're just so foolish that they will never be able to get instructed? They don't know. And so it's a lack of knowledge, lack of wisdom, lack of understanding, right?
Like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You know, to me that carries 2 different levels of fear. In the stress world, there's distress, which is the fear that you talk about makes you sick. Distress is fear. There's also eustress that motivates you and helps you get stuff done. And so somebody who's completely ignorant, say you go to the deep jungle and find this tribe has never heard of God before, and when you first start telling them about God, about heaven and about hell, then they're going to have a distressful type of fear because of this knowledge that they just gained. But then once they start becoming Christians and growing as Christians, then it turns into a eustress type fear where it motivates them to study and do better. So I think that there's different levels of fear. There's fear, this can apply that the lack of knowledge can be a part of it.
Well, and what is, so let me ask this. We see that, so the fool, and we're talking about the fool here, they despise wisdom and instruction. Well, what is wisdom? It is truth, right? Wisdom is knowledge of truth. So we know that truth is the main point of wisdom. You know, because anything outside of truth is what? Foolish. Could we make that assumption? You know, so if you have an absence of truth, then I think you could be called a fool. You know, but it's a seeking of truth. You know, fools don't seek truth, right? Because they think they know everything. Yeah, exactly. Well, and if any of y'all have kids, y'all know, like I've had some talks with my 13-year-old daughter. Well, Dad doesn't know. I am clueless as to what she deals with in the world and what she's going through. Like, I just don't know, but she knows it all. And if you ask, and I don't think it's just her, I think it's that age group, and like before I left for Miami a couple weeks ago for another fair, we had kind of butt some heads on some stuff, and like I'd take her to school and try to talk or whatever, and I'm not getting any feedback, and I'm just like, for some reason she hates me, and I was like, is what I'm thinking, but it's like, no, it's just she's a adolescent, she's a 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old girl, and just don't take it personal. But I do know that at some point, just like my father didn't know, after I was in my 30s, I started to feel like Dad's pretty smart, Dad definitely knew what, but I was just not wise enough. I was too foolish to understand it. But the great thing about foolishness, if you have a quest for knowledge or a quest for understanding, your foolishness can go away. Now I do believe that we are fools without God and his wisdom, or lady wisdom, as in Solomon, it's lady wisdom is what we're learning about. And, we get the examples from, I think he pretty much calls her lady wisdom, so this wisdom, when we get later on, I know in verse 20 is the first little poem that we have from lady wisdom, and there's several throughout Proverbs. But as I go on, one of the things that I look at here, anytime there's a list in the Bible, I think it's very important for us to look at that list. He gives us the first list in verse 3. He says, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. So we know that wisdom is aligned with justice, judgment, and equity. They're all together. They're not separated. And I think it's very important for us to see that, because once we align our thoughts and our ways to wisdom, to his wisdom, everything else falls away, but everything else also, everything bad falls away, everything good comes together. We've heard the saying, birds of a feather flock together, and I know as Christians, we flock together because we have the same mindset, we have the same ways, we have the same focus, correct? So I think that's very important for us to understand, but it is, a wise man will hear and increase learning.
Yeah, I think part of that dichotomy too, though, is it takes humility, because you have to acknowledge that I don't know everything. And I think that's going back to verse 7, I think that's why fools despise him, because it requires humility. And I know for my family, I got some fools that don't acknowledge humility at all.
Well, a lot of our ego doesn't want us to be humble, right? And have you ever heard ego edging God out? You ever heard of that? Ego stands for edging God out, or earth God only. It can't guide you to the spiritual world. It's the same type thing. I go back to the story of my mentor, who's a master. I will never see myself as a master painter, because I believe if I think I'm a master, I don't have any room to grow or learn. I will be a lifetime student of the Word, but also of the art world, of everything. Like, I know I don't know enough, but I want to know more, and I strive to learn more. But all I want to know is the truth. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's harder to find the truth in the world than ever before. It is hidden, it's shadow banned, like they don't want us to find the truth. And so for me, I'm a truth seeker. Even when I got tattoos in my young wild phases, at least they were godly tattoos and said to seek truth. So I am a truth seeker. I want the truth all the time, nothing but the truth. And yes, I can handle the truth. Some people, a few good men says, you can't handle the truth. Well, I can handle the truth. Bring it. I want it. I want every bit of it. Everything wrapped up in truth. Give it to me, please. And if it hurts, I'm thankful, because it's going to be a lesson that I'm going to learn, and I'm going to be able to grow in truth and love, period. So for me, I'm excited for that, but I love to learn. One of the reasons I took this whenever Chip asked me to speak for a couple of months here, I took it because fearful, but also know that I'm going to learn more. By doing this, it's going to make me study more, because I don't want to come in here and be not ready, but I also want to be able to speak with knowledge and understanding. And the only way to get that is through this. And one of the commitments I'm going to make to you guys as to teach this class for the next 2 months is that daily I will be in Proverbs. I'm going to read Proverbs every single day, and I'm going to deep dive into Proverbs the best that I can, and I'm going to cross-reference it. I'm going to listen to as many people that I can listen to in a weekly basis or a daily basis that give me their understanding and their knowledge, and what can I learn from them. Now, not all people, but people in truth, people in the Word, of course. So that is my commitment to you, that I will be deep diving in this. And Proverbs is one of those books that anytime I started a Bible study, I always found myself in Proverbs. But I'm a wisdom and truth seeker. That is what I want. I want to be wise like Solomon was wise. I mean, when we look at Solomon, Solomon might have been the wealthiest man ever to live. Would y'all agree with that? I mean, he was so wealthy, and he was so smart and so wise that, was it the the Queen of Sheba maybe? Or I think she actually she paid him for his advice, because his kingdom was so abundant and so perfect that people paid him for his opinions. But if you were to look at his value in today's world, and this fiat dollar that seems to be printed out of nowhere, and they can give it to all the countries in the world, and we got all kinds of issues here, but we seem to be printing it and giving it out. But he would be a trillionaire without a doubt. Solomon would have been at that level, and we hear that it's harder to thread the eye of a needle, right? For a rich man to enter into heaven. It doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means it's difficult. But I do believe that our God is so abundant that he wants us to be abundant in all areas of life, including our money. Because if we're not abundant, then the devil and his army are winning. All the bad people can't have all the money. It's got to be equal. We have to go up against them with our money. And it's not all about money, but money does make things happen. And through faith and through our wisdom in his word, our money, when we make money, if we do it in the right ways, it will grow even more abundantly. And there will be no caps to our abundance. And that's the kind of abundance I want from God. And I know that the closer I get into his spirit, and my ways are spiritual, like the fruits of the Spirit, the more I act out of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and the biggest one for me is self-control. That's something that I've struggled with my whole life, is self-control. And if I can get a hold on that one, now I struggled with love for a period of time. I don't struggle with love anymore. I have no problem saying I love everyone in here. I'll say it to your face, and I'll give you a hug, and I'll even give you a kiss if you want it, But I love every one of you equally. I don't hold different people and different, I love this person more than, my kids and my wife, or, they're up there, but I try not to love them more than I love you. Because I believe God's love is abundant and it's equal. It's as exact as you can get. So if I'm going to be like God or love like God, didn't we see, was it John the Baptist? What did they say about him? What did God say about him? He had a heart like God, right? That's my goal. I want to have a heart like God. So the only way I can have a heart like God is to what? Love like God would love. And that's endless. There's no end to his love, right? So for the believers, for sure. But I think the more we can focus on that, the better off we're going to be. And then as we get into Proverbs more, I think we'll see that. We'll see more examples of his love and how it works through the wisdom of truth. And so for me, I want to be as truthful as I can with you, but I want to be as truthful as I can in my daily life. Because there was a period of time where I was not truthful with my word. I would lie to do anything, to get anything, but it takes a liar to know one. And also, I know I can sniff out falsehood from miles away, because I've ran with the worst of them. I've done some of the worst stuff, but because of that, I've learned, I've experienced, I have knowledge, and I have wisdom on those things. And so now it's hard to pull the wool over my eyes, and it's hard to get over on me because I'm so focused on truth that God gives me what I seek, right? So because I'm a truth seeker, guess what I get more of in my life? Truth, right? And love, So I seek to love everyone, even my enemies. And that's the hardest one, right? That is our hardest thing to do, is to love our enemies. But as soon as we can throw love their way, guess what? They lose their power, right? When you love something, if it has a stronghold over you, it can't hang anymore because you've already attached love to it. And in love, there is no hatred, right? I can't hate you if I love you. It's impossible. It's like light and dark. They don't mix. And the light is always more powerful, of course, right? Is that a 5-minute warning? Is that you need to be quiet? And which I never know. Is the first one, is it over? That's over. Okay, well, I didn't get very far in the first 7, which I didn't think I would. It said just the beginning, so we got into the beginning. But next week, we're going to talk about shunning evil counsel. And then as we're going through these stories of Solomon to his son, we will cover those a little more. And I'm going to group some of them together. Please, if any of y'all have any, like I said, any request for any certain chapters, please give it to me, and I'll do my best to study it and bring y'all some truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.